Number 17359-23, presentation and discussion of Fire Station 4 replacement project. And we have Chief Troy Hughes here.
Madam Chair, members of the council, members online, it's great to be here tonight. This is one of those occasions where we get to talk about something that's been in the works for a long time since I've been here. What we're looking at, and I think you can go ahead and put the next slide up, we'll talk a little bit about this. We took a look at the council goals, and we talk about effective, efficient, reliable service, and a fire station's part of that, and obviously part of the quality of life and public safety part. So we've looked at this for a long time. One of the things that we've done over the course of the last 3 years is we've reserved some of our fire funds, which are funds that are generated by the state fire marshal and given to us for our operations and things. And we got permission from them to kind of reserve some of those funds for the last 3 years. So we built up quite a substantial pot of money to fund this project. And we've also gotten, just in the last few months, a $2 million allocation through the governor's capital outlay fund, which is not something the county went after, I went after as a fire chief, but our labor people went to the governor's office and asked for that. And that's been one of the things she's funded throughout the state in many communities. I think Espanola just got one last year, and I think Farmington's gotten one in the past, and other communities. So it's been kind of on her radar for a number of years since she's been governor. So we're thankful for that to come along at the right time when we're doing this. As you know, I think we talked about the fire stations on the Lanel side. We have the current Fire Station 5, which is near the back gate going up into the Hamas, under construction now. It's been under construction for quite a while. You don't see much action, but I think within the next 30 to 60 days, you'll start to see some walls as the footings have all been poured, and a lot of the slab is being poured now, so we'll start to see that. So that's kind of what got us into this vein, and for some other reasons. So we'll go to the next slide, and I'll keep going. What is needed when we look at a new fire station? Some of the things that we're facing since we built these stations, and I think that station that we're looking at 4 was a 1960 build, I think, maybe sooner. It's pretty dated. Gender neutral showers, restroom facilities, 40, 50, 60 years ago, it was exclusively a male operation. Boys were firefighters, and it was kind of like a locker room type mentality, and we've had to manage it differently these days, and we are recruiting actively to get more females. Obviously, our Deputy Chief Wendy's one of those examples of that coming into the service, and so we're looking at that to build the stations with that in mind going forward. And when we talk about hot, warm, and cold zones, this is more of a hazmat terminology that we use. Is we, no matter what we do when we go out into the public, we're faced with things that aren't good for you, whether it's COVID or other sicknesses that the patient may have, or if it's a hazardous material that's gotten out of the container and spilled onto the ground or spilled into the air, or it's a fire and there's products of combustion. No matter what we do, we generally are faced with something we're going to bring back to the station. And so in the new designs, and you'll see one coming up on one of the later slides that's under construction, they create areas where we bring that back into the station. We have a decon room where we go through, and then we come back into the station after we get cleaned up. So we don't bring that into the living quarters anymore, and you'll see that in that design. And then individual resting quarters. I remember when I started back in 1985, literally we had maybe 16 inches between the beds in one big sleeping room. We could reach over and touch the guy if he was on that side of the bed, and you'd wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and have a face, within about a foot of yours sometimes. And so we know that's not great for the spread of disease and other things that we may carry back, and with some of that. So, and it wasn't built to accommodate, a mixed gender type environment. And then modern, efficient heating and cooling systems, which many of the stations struggle with that as they age. So we'll go on. The current Fire Station 4 is pretty dated. We've had some structural issues, and if you're not aware of that station, when you drive by it, it looks kind of like a single story. But when you go around back, there's a basement underneath it. And one of the things that creates is the trucks get heavier, they get bigger, there's more stuff on it, and that creates some structural issues because that station wasn't originally built to contain really big trucks backing in on there. And it's deteriorated over time. We've got a lot of cracks. We've done some reinforcement on it. We've had some water intrusion into that basement area just because of the design and how water runs off within our county. We don't have any provision for keeping those contaminants out, so we just have kind of one big area with doors that aren't sealed. We don't have airlocks in them. And again, a design only for males originally. We'll go on to the next one. Current standards, proper separation, I've talked about that. The decon room to clean gear, male and female showering, restroom provisions, sleeping quarters, and then that positive pressure to the living areas. And I think the next slide is the station that's under construction. And as you look at this, and this might be kind of an eye test too, but hopefully you can see it. You see the apparatus bay, a lot of the service areas that we work on our gear off to the left, and then that yellow area where you look at turnout washroom and turnout lockers, and that's not really well detailed, but that's got showers included in it, laundry facilities, and then clean clothes. So they kind of transition through that, come back into that, and then they enter the station again into the green area. And then you see the outflows going out of that. That entire green area has got a positive pressure on it, similar to what facilities are like in the lab, PF4 or others, where it pushes it all out into the truck bay, so they don't bring those things into the station. And so that's kind of the new modern design. You see the individual sleeping quarters along the back where the beds are with exterior windows so we can get some fresh air. That's one of the things that we struggle with when you put, 5 or 6 people or even 10 people in a station is people don't like to sleep at the same temperatures. And so the individual rooms also facilitate that. Storage areas, a gym, which we all have standards now that are much higher than they were in the past or non-existent in the past for physical fitness and wellness, and so the gym's a big important part of that too. And this station is the current Station 5 that's under construction now. There'll be 3 similar stations built. This is the core design that they're going to use on Lannel. I think the only difference is one that will contain our battalion chief and support officer that kind of run the entire shift. We'll do a little bit of an addition to that station. Otherwise, there'll be 2 that will be exactly like this. And what our hope is that we can adapt a site that we find here in Los Alamos County to fit this design on. And some of that's for efficiency. So, we kind of keep our storage and our stuff in the same place. So we train people on how to use things, and they kind of have a routine where no matter what station they're at, they can all operate the same way. So, okay, and we'll go to the next. Some of the things that we look at when we look at sites, and you guys all know through the housing and everything else that we do, we're pretty limited on places to just pop things up. So it's tough for us to do that. So we want to maintain the response times. That District 4 out there has a certain area that they cover, and when we get our insurance rating from that, it's based on how they can respond within that area, and we've done well. We're an ISO 1, one of the few communities in New Mexico that is. And so we don't want to really move that very far because that could impact the insurance rates for our residents and commercial property even more. The other thing is public land is important to us. If we can put it on public land, that eliminates a lot of things. Land that we actually control as a county would be helpful to us too. And the other thing, we still have to keep that existing fire station up and running in full capacity during this process. So that's another part of our consideration. And as you know, the terrain throughout the county is pretty difficult to build on in some places. So it may look, when you look at an overhead map, like there's a lot of space, but there may be a lot of trees and a lot of rock and a lot of stuff that would prevent us from doing that. So we'll look at that too. And then we have to have access to utilities to operate that station, and then design and cost feasibility. We can build it in a lot of places, but some places would be more expensive because we have to move utilities there, and we have to do a lot of dirt work and other things that would add to the cost, and so we're trying to keep that down. So some of the site options that we looked at, this box we kind of put around the general area where Fire Station 4 is now, up at the top of Loma Linda between the housing and the road there, and there's some park area. That's kind of an open area. That's one of the considerations. It's fairly flat. We like that area. There's some area near the golf course maintenance yard, which wouldn't impact the course, but probably a little bit more terrain challenges and maybe some trees in that area that would be less attractive to us. The current fire station location is obviously another one that we would look at. That would cause us to maybe have to try and build that on where that annex building is now or somewhere else, so we can keep the main station up and running during that time. And again, I think there's some terrain issues there with that 2-story building, and we'd like to adapt that current single-story flat building to work in that site. And it's possible, we'd have to look into that, but that's one too. That keeps all of our response times the same. The district's the same, which is kind of nice. And then I think maybe the other area, I think that's it, right, Ann, or is there just 3? Okay. Yeah, there's not a lot of choices. And so when we look at that station that I showed you that's under construction, we just had our planning people just take that roughly and lay it on the existing spot. And if you look to the left, or my left, your right on the screen, probably the section is the current station, and then where that overlay is where that annex building is built, just off Range Road. And so that kind of gives you an idea on what that station would look like in proximity to the site and how it would be built. And that's Station 4 in the current location. We'll go on to the next one. The maintenance yard is just off, I think, San I there on the course, and that's kind of what it looks like in that area. So a little different. Coming onto the road to be a little bit different, and quite a bit of terrain work to be done there and challenges there, but it's another possibility. And then we'll go to the last one, and this is Loma Linda. And if you're not real familiar with it, you can see the Loma Linda housing development there, and then where that verbiage is that from planning, that's kind of where that pocket park is, where that small park that's got kind of a two-track road that goes back there. It's not improved, but that's one of the things that's back in there, so that's what you see. Fairly good site. The one concern on this is the slope of the road going up to it, and the wintertime could be challenging, but that would be something we just have to deal with in that area. So I think that's all the sites that we have. I think I talked about the money. We've done a pretty good job of saving our funds. We've got that other, so we're hopeful, that we can build this without a lot of impact to the county budget. There's some other ways to do that, and I think we've got a really good team. So I think, Eric, you're up. So let Eric talk more.
All right, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council. So over the next few slides, I'll cover some of the more project management related topics. Of course, everything that the chief said, operationally and what they're looking at is part of the project scope, but we'll touch on and highlight a few different things, including the project timeline, the outline of the general scope, the plan for public engagement, and the short-term next steps for the project. So on this slide, it lists a preliminary overall schedule for the project. For the remainder of this year, our effort would consist of procuring the necessary professional services for site selection, design, and public outreach, followed by a contract approval by council. So upon execution of that services contract, the project team would then proceed with public engagement and acquire input on site selection, and would return to council for selection of a building site. Next year, in 2024, we hope to be fully engaged in the design development phase of the project, with the completion of construction documents to follow. At that point, we would advertise the project for construction bids, and then come to council again for approval of that construction contract. So fast forward to 2025, we would hope to be in construction about that time, and complete, around the end of the year, if the schedule stays on track and if we don't run into any, supply issues and labor issues that we've all seen too recently. Next slide. So the general scope, this is an outline of that, with the project beginning with the site selection phase, which will include the evaluation of sites that Chief Hughes mentioned, and maybe others that might reveal themselves through our process. But again, as Chief Hughes mentioned, we're kind of limited in the location and the area. Terrain is difficult, but we're open to hearing other thoughts as we go through the site selection phase. And so as part of that evaluation, we would look at items such as development costs, location of the adjacent utilities, environmental impacts such as impacts to trees and open space. We'll also consider sustainable design options, including looking at the county's own LEED Silver requirements that we have for new buildings. And then we would follow with assembling a matrix to compare and contrast the various site options. Public engagement and outreach is going to be a big part of this phase, while also looking at how the site may need to be adapted to fit the prototype design that Chief Hughes talked about, and shown in the previous slide, the slide that showed the fire station 5 layout and floor plan. And then, and of course, a design that will meet the needs of the fire department. So as Chief Hughes mentioned, consistency in the layout is important. That way, as they rotate staff through various fire stations, they're all familiar where things are at, and things are easy to find for them. So as the Fire department also plans to replace Fire Station 6 in the future. We anticipate using this contract as well to include a similar scope and process to acquire the same services needed to look at that Fire Station 6 design as well. That'll save us time and effort, particularly since we're looking at a prototype design that can be carried forward from Station 4 to also Station 6. Next slide. So again, public outreach is a big part of this process. This outlines some of the efforts that we've identified and plan to address, which includes identifying the affected parties associated with each site and potential issues of concern that may be brought up. We'll conduct some meetings with interested groups, neighboring residents, and property owners. We'll use tools like SurveyMonkey or other kind of web-based surveys to acquire broad public input as well. And we'll utilize town halls, board and commission meetings to present our evaluations and share input received, and of course solicit more input at those meetings as well. And then of course throughout the process we'll document the input we received and eventually present our findings to council to help with the selection of an appropriate site. Next one. And so this slide summarizes our short-term next steps, including obtaining your input tonight to finalize the scope of the project, then move forward with procuring design services and awarding the contract, which we would anticipate to occur this summer. During the latter part of the year, we would work on the public outreach effort, present our findings to council, and again, request council action for selection of the site in order for the design to continue on. So, and I think that's it. So with that, the chief and I stand for any questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Any questions or comments from councilors? Councilor Hand?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, for both of you, I'd like to ask, I didn't really see that you have D&D identified as part of the scope. Is that part of the scope of this replacement project for Fire Station 4?
Yes, design development, if that's what you're...
No. D&D, decommissioning and demolition. You can use all sorts of Ds. You can call it decontamination. You can use Ds for everything, but anyway, that's what I meant.
Yes, if we're building on the existing site, then that would certainly be part of it. We could potentially also look at, what could the building also be used for? We may acquire input on that. The building is aged. We've put a little bit of work into it to kind of keep it going. So, to try to reuse is probably a tall task and probably an expensive one at that. But yes, decommissioning and demolition would be something that we would certainly include in the scope as well.
So on this site where the existing fire station is that a good, did you guys like that site? Did that work for you?
I'll touch on that a little bit,
okay,
and then I'll let the chief take that on as well. One of the advantages of the existing site is its adjacency to Diamond Drive, has immediate access. However, in order to maintain fire operations, we'd have to keep that building in operation. So as the chief mentioned, we would have to look at the adjacent annex building as a potential building site. Okay. That site would probably access Range Road rather than directly onto Diamond Drive. Probably not the best scenario. I'll let the chief speak to that a little bit, but it allows for that, maintenance of operations while the new site is being developed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilor Hand, I think we're so early in the process that I think that would be a consideration. Will that kind of prototype design fit on that site with the terrain, and all those things would be questions, and I think that's why, I'll explain part of that. when we save those fire funds, they only let us save them for 3 years. So the stuff's kind of getting close to that 3-year mark. And so we want to kind of start to use some of that money to pay the architect to say, can you look at this site and tell us what it would take? Can we put this building on there? And so, or we come back to council and say, well, it might work better on this other site. And then do you guys have maybe housing, like lifestyle housing associated with the golf course that could go in that area that might be better? And so I think there's just a lot of variables. Response-wise, we know what our numbers are for the insurance office and other things like that for the state fire marshal and the funds that are generated through that. So we say, well, we're pretty comfortable. We've got experience there. And so that's, it may work. It may be the best site in the end. We're just not quite sure until we really get that feedback. And, maybe it takes a 2-story type building in that to work to get us up to the access to the Diamond Drive versus a 1-story. So those are all things we'd want to look at. But it's a very good potential site.
Thank you.
And I'll add to that a little bit, Madam Chair and Councilor Hand, is that, like you mentioned, we're very early on. We haven't even got an architect's or an engineer's eyes on this yet, other than our own. So very early in the process, but these are some of the things that, of course, we would be considering as part of the design development phase.
Thank you.
Okay, other councilors? Councilor Haverman?
Thank you, Chair Jurgix, and thank you for the presentation to both of you. So granted, it's early in the design, early in this, haven't even gotten to the word design yet. So there's always that balance, right, of doing that and having some real tangible information to share when you do the public outreach, but then also making sure you get public outreach that maybe influences some of the drafts that get, proposed and contemplated. So I'm just kind of acknowledging that challenge and maybe encouraging kind of an anticipation of what kinds of questions and concerns might be out there so that there's been some thought given of how to maybe answer those or be ready with information to, help people understand better. Because I could imagine some objections with at least 2 of those 3 sites. So question number 1, are these the only 3 that are possible? Was there anything else when you were brainstorming that could come up, or is it pretty much these 3 and that's it?
Madam Chair, Councilor Haveman, I think the potential sites are kind of unlimited, but, obviously limited by what's available and what we have control of as a county. And, there's other ownerships out there that might facilitate a fire station. And maybe during our public outreach, somebody comes and says, hey, we think this would be great. We realize the easiest site with the least amount of probably conflict is the existing site because it already has a fire station. People have become accustomed to that and they know it's there. And so we know that would probably be the less bumpy road, but maybe not the best for the county as a whole. If we look at the big picture, maybe another site might be better where we could allow that property to serve a greater need than what it is today. So I just don't think we have the answers. But yeah, I think there could be more that come to play through that input that we get from the public and you guys.
Well, I appreciate that comment because that's a segue to kind of just the last comment I wanted to make was, I think you laid out some nice bullets for decision criteria and maintaining response time is one of them, and that probably should be paramount. That would make sense. That's the purpose of the whole fire department. But so then it'll be interesting to see if there's any kind of much of a delta in emergency response time between the 3 locations. But besides that one, I know that I would like to support consideration for maximizing opportunities for housing. And so, making sure that we don't pick the one that then negates that other overarching goal. And then also minimizing the impacts to our natural environment. So clearly the existing station, if there were trees to be cut down, they've already been cut down. But in any drainage impacts may not be as much, et cetera, and wildlife corridor impacts, et cetera. But that also might be the best site for more housing because it at least appeared on the 3 charts. It's the larger lot of the 3, flat, easy to build on, et cetera. So anyway, I just want to throw in my 2 cents for housing and protection of the natural environment. Oh, and I had a third one. Sorry, I have to learn to scroll on this thing. An impact on parks and rec amenities. And then it kind of raised the question: well, how much is the Loma Linda tot lot utilized? Do we have data on that, et cetera? And I'm sure that would come out, but of course that's a consideration as well. Thank you.
Okay, other councilors? Councilor Reddy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Dickerson. It was convenient to go after Councilor Haveman this evening. I don't disagree with a lot of what she said, but it's an interesting thing. I thought I'd comment first on the basically your approach, because just listening to all this information, there's a lot of fairly technical information as well as, I mean, and entirely agree, people have to have a chance to get used to an idea of the station might have to move. But it seems like it's going to be very tricky to try to get, the neighbor input or neighbor impacts plus then the broader impacts and try to somehow, compute that with all the other factors that we have to look at here. And certainly you can see, real roughly you can tell, well, looks like there's the maximum environmental impact on the San Ildefonso location. Loma Linda might be not as much, but there's some of both of those. And then there's certainly different neighbor impacts as you've moved the station. And it seems like you've impacted maybe how it's going to function operationally. And so I'm not sure at what point you get that additional information so that when the public, you have like a town, like the charrette kind of concept. Here's where it could be, this would look like. Seems like this project might be more amenable to something like that. That's something a little bit more tangible. I think as Councilor Haveman was alluding to, is that so people could see this is what it would kind of look like here if we were going to try to put it here. And then I had a practical question about, so the current location seems ideal, assuming the annex building's empty, which I think it's not, right? So you're using that, and so where's the stuff they're going to go if you do decide to build there? And is that, maybe you can just answer that first.
All right. Madam Chair, Councilor Ridey, I think that is one of the considerations we'd have, and that's a big metal frame building that can be picked up and moved. And so that might be some of what we do is we take that and we put it on another site somewhere that we own as a county, maybe even on a fire department site at another station where we put that there to store things because it's got a lot of our reserve apparatus and it's still a good building. It just would need a new floor and foundation. And so that's a possibility. We'd probably be one of the costs that we'd have built into this that would, getting that moved and relocating the equipment that would be in that station.
Okay. And then if in the case where maybe you don't rebuild there, this scenario might be to have, because there is additional land at the other two locations, there might be more that you might want to look at, but you could move the building there. I'm not sure where it makes the most sense or where you have room at other stations. But it seems like that's one of the complexities of this outreach is just to try to make sure the public is aware of like some of the major requirements we have in terms of logistics and how you actually do this. Because I would be, concerned about, because we had heard a lot of comments from people about, impacts on the environment, and this is a more qualitative approach so far, right, that we're taking to. It's going to be one of the factors look at, and certainly, the main thing is the public safety, right? So the response times, I think the response times might be, even though they're very close spatially, they're kind of in very different configurations in terms of exiting. So I don't know. Is that something you're going to be able to quantify for, at least for, a more approximate answer than just, high, medium, and low?
Yeah, we've looked at that and ran the predicted, times, and it doesn't change significantly from any of the three spots. We're still pretty good in that location. All three of those really give a similar response time. Nothing that we're concerned about as far as differences.
Okay, and that's even coming down that steep road. And
Yeah.
It doesn't add much to the response time.
Well, I think we want to consider what does the future look like for that mesa. There's maybe some future housing near the ball fields, maybe on that private across from the middle school. So are we going to add houses that may cause a need for increased response? And is that better up there, or is it better where it's at? So I think all those are factors that me as the fire chief, I'll talk about it, but I want to bring it back to you and have you guys as a council make that decision, because you're making the decision based on everything that affects this county. And I think, it's larger than just the fire station response times. It's all those things, housing, environment, Parks and Rec, that get folded into that. And so we can kind of bring back our fire department perspective and then you fold the rest of it in and say, go do this, and we'll be happy to do it.
Yeah, because I mean, the alternate sites, I think there's the tot lot, but is zoned as open space, I believe, at this moment. Do you know what the zoning is there with our new zoning map?
I'll take a guess. I believe it is maybe, I think it is open space. I just can't remember if it's active or passive or how it's labeled.
It's probably passive open space. That's probably the same zoning as for the parcel next to, although that might be one of the ones the zoning hasn't been updated yet. But those basically have the same zoning. And so I think that they to people, they look like they are open space, and so you'd be changing the use to have a fire station there instead. And I think that either one of those, that would be, so I think it's good to get that information to the community, see what the reaction is, but my assumption is a lot of people are not going to react positively to, reconfiguring it, but they understand we need to have fire stations too. So I think it's a balancing matter, and I think you're just giving them, do we want to put a fire station here? When they're not going to get the option of housing, and they're not zoned for housing right now, right? So they're zoned as open space. So we're taking something that's open space and putting a fire station there. And so I think that's going to get a reaction from people with that proposal.
Madam Chair, I think our intention on that, looking at that, and as far back as that is on the lot, we think we could actually improve that, leave that where it's at, and some of the hard surfaces we need for testing hose and parking, cars might be part that would improve that pocket park now from where it is today, where now it's just kind of a two-track through the dirt that gets back there, and with what we need to get access to the back of our station, we may be able to improve access for the public to that. So that's part of the consideration. We wouldn't want to remove that from that plan. We'd want to maintain that, maybe even improve it.
Okay. Well, okay, it sounds like you have some ideas as to how to communicate some of what you're proposing, but I think the more specifics you have, the better for getting input that's informed. Thank you.
Other counselors? Okay, I have a couple of questions. So the two alternate sites involve the roundabout. So I'm assuming that this station services the two mesas and the golf course area of town. So obviously going to either of the mesas, you have to deal with the roundabout. But by moving it up on North Mesa, then to get into the golf course area, you have to deal with the roundabout. Have you thought about maneuvering the vehicles around the roundabout and the traffic?
Yeah, we currently do that now. The bulk of our calls from that station are going to be on one of the three mesas, either, near the stables, up Sani or up on Barranca. And so we're doing that on a pretty regular basis. One of the things that we know of in talking to planning is that there is a road planned between the middle school and the ball fields to connect the two mesas. And so that does give us that option where if it's on either one of those, in that area, on that mesa, we can not have to go back down to the roundabout and come back up. We can cross. One of the things we've looked at response times in that configuration is not utilizing the school parking lot as a response route, because that's just not something we'd want to do. We don't think it's safe. We don't think it's proper for us to use that. So, in the meantime, we may have to go clear to the stables and back around to get to that would be one of the things that we do. But yeah, we have considered that, but that is a concern. Wintertime going down that more than up it. The trucks are pretty heavy and do pretty well on slick conditions, but going down could be a little bit treacherous if it's not been treated. Mm-hmm. But it is today for us too.
Okay. And then the other location is, if I'm looking at the map correctly, not too far from the middle school. Is that right? On San Ildefonso? And there's a lot of traffic on that road going, and probably will be more as we have more housing on there. So, okay, so you're aware of all these things? Okay. All right, I guess that's all I have for now. We'll wait to see what you bring back to us.
And Madam Chair, if I may, just to touch on something you said and Councilor Riley is there is a lot of quantitative data that we can look at that's related to a lot of the questions and comments we heard here tonight. So, and that is our intent, is to kind of get all that information and eventually kind of put it in somewhat of a matrix table, or, you know, a compare and contrast of how different sites compare and contrast with each other. So that'll be part of this scope and what we want to have our design professionals put together for us during the early on portion of the site selection process. So